there's so many things that happen in history that people don't know about, or it's just kind of buried because of the way history is taught, the way history is told. And like a big resurgence this in the Black Lives Matter movement. Ugh, man. So the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement this last year saw a lot of renewed interest in American history, right? There was also the 1619 Project that came out the year before that just kind of raised awareness of how Black Americans have been treated across American history, frankly, and how what we're seeing today is deeply tied to that history. It's the outcome of that history. History is always relevant to politics. It's always relevant to social issues because it informs how we got here. One of those, one event that got a lot more, general popular knowledge was the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre, race massacre. In history books, it's often referred to as a race riot, which really is a biased, unfair summation or explanation. Because Tulsa, Oklahoma race massacre was when white supremacists attacked what was known as Black Wall Street at the time. It was a center of independent wealth generated by Black Americans. And, really quick, just a little background on it. If we look at history.com, the Tulsa Race Massacre, this is updated in April 19th, 2021. I wonder if it was called a riot before then. But you can see here, this is Tulsa, Oklahoma, where not only were people murdered in the streets, but white supremacists flew biplanes over the city, this black area of Tulsa, and dropped bombs. They dropped bombs. Like this wasn't the U.S. military. It was U.S. civilian white supremacist bombing a civilian population. What does this remind us of? We were just talking about Israel and Palestine earlier, right? And it's often Gaza and Palestine are likened to the Jim Crow South. Well, we can kind of see part of why. So during the Tulsa Race Massacre, also known as the Tulsa Race Riot, as it was known, which occurred over 18 hours from May 31st to June 1st, 1921. So we're reaching the 100-year anniversary of this massacre. A white mob attacked residents, homes, and businesses in the predominantly black Greenwood neighborhood of Tulsa, Oklahoma. The event remains one of the worst incidents of racial violence in U.S. history, and for a period remained one of the least known. News reports were largely squelched despite the fact that hundreds of people were killed and thousands left homeless. Hundreds of people were killed. Let's see. Black Wall Street. In much of the country, the years following World War I saw a spike in racial tensions, including a resurgence of the white supremacist group, the Ku Klux Klan, numerous lynchings, and other acts of racially motivated violence, as well as efforts by African Americans to prevent such attacks on their communities. By 1921, fueled by oil money, Tulsa was a growing, prosperous city with a population of more than 100,000 people, but crime rates were high and vigilante justice of all kinds wasn't uncommon. Tulsa was also a highly segregated city. Most of the city's 10,000 black residents lived in a neighborhood called Greenwood, which included a thriving business district, sometimes referred to as Black Wall Street. So here are just some photos from this time, and so it's insane. It's absolutely insane. Look, so here is the bombed out Tulsa. And whoever was sharing this image, keep in mind, white supremacists would turn lynchings into postcards, like photos of lynchings into postcards. It's written here, Little Africa on Fire, Tulsa Race Riot, June 1st, 1921. So whoever wrote this on this image called it Little Africa. So you could see just what was done to this city. This was also recently depicted. A lot of people became aware of this recently because it was depicted in the Watchmen show on HBO, and people were pissed off. Racists were pissed off that this was seen. Here's white these white supremacist, National Guard troops carry rifles with bayonets attached while escorting unarmed African American men after the Tulsa Race Massacre. Sorry, I spoke too soon there. So the National Guard had to come in to defend these victims of this violence. Here's people just going through the rubble. Now, we see this and we get this idea that, man, history was wild and it was so long ago and what a crazy event. But get this, Congress is held a, I mean, what do you call it? So the House Judiciary Committee, the committee has a subcommittee on the Constitution, Civil Rights, and Civil Liberties, holding a hearing recently titled "Continuing Injustice: The Centennial of the Tulsa Greenwood Race Massacre." And that which we think is relegated to the past in history, like they're going to have to bring in, historians, and they're going to have to bring in archivists and all kinds of, these people to testify about this. Well, guess what, guys? There are still people alive today who lived through the massacre, who survived the Tulsa massacre. And here's one of them, and this is just absolutely incredible. This is her testimony to Congress.
Thank you. I don't have a mother, so thank you. Mother Fletcher is the oldest living survivor of the Tulsa Race Massacre. She was 7 years old when she lived through the massacre. Mother Fletcher, you are now recognized to testify.
My name is Viola Fletcher. I'm the daughter of Lucinda Ellis and John Wesley Ford of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm the sister of Hughes Van Ellis, who's also here today. I'm a survivor of the Tulsa Race Massacre. 2 weeks ago, I celebrated my 107th birthday.
Can you believe that? She's 107 years old. That deserves applause. Jeez.
Today, I'm visiting Washington, D.C. for the first time in my life. I'm here seeking justice, and I'm asking my country to acknowledge what happened in Tulsa in 1921. On May 31st in 21, I went to bed at my family's home in Greenwood, neighbors of Tulsa. The neighborhood I felt asleep in that night was rich, not just in terms of wealth, but in culture, community, heritage, and my family had a beautiful home. We had great neighbors, and I had friends to play with. I felt safe. I had everything a child could need. I had a bright future ahead of me. Greenwood could, Still, Greenwood should have given me the chance to truly make it in this country. Within a few hours, all of that was gone. The night of the massacre, I was awakened by my family. My parents and 5 siblings were there. I was told we had to leave, and that was it. I will never forget the violence of the white mob when we left our home. I still see black men being shot, black bodies lying in the street. I still smell smoke and see fire. I still see black businesses being burned. I still hear airplanes flying overhead. I hear the screams. I have lived through the massacre every day. Our country may forget this history, but I cannot. I will not, and other survivors do not, and our descendants do not. When my family was forced to leave Tulsa, I lost my chance of an education. I never finished school past the 4th grade. I have never made much money in my country. State and city took a lot from me. Despite this, I spent time
Jim Jordan.
supporting the war effort in the shipyards of California. But most of my life, I was a domestic worker serving white families.
And that's exactly what the white supremacist terrorist thugs wanted. If not to kill her, to make sure that she lived her life in servitude to white people. Keep in mind, that's the legacy of white supremacy in this country. It's not solely based on this belief of superiority. Absolutely, that's at the heart of it, but it's also an economic reality. It's based in the economic exploitation of people of color. Don't forget it.
I never made much money, but to this day, I can barely afford my everyday needs. All the while, the city of this Tulsa have unjustly used the names and stories of victims like me to enrich myself and its white allies through the 30s million raised by the Tulsa Centennial Commissioner while I was continued to live in poverty. I am a 107-year-old and have never been seen justice. I pray that one day I will. I have been blessed with a long life and have seen the best and the worst of this country. I think about the terror, horror inflicted upon black people in this country every day. This subcontinued committee has the power to lead us down a better path. I'm asking that my country acknowledge what has been happened to me, the traumas and the pain, the loss, and I ask survivors and descendants to be given a chance to seek justice, open the door. All of you know how easy it is to deny that a violent mob threatened your lives and took your property. For 70 years, the city of Tulsa and its Chamber of Commerce told us that the massacre didn't happen, like we didn't see it with our own eyes. You have me here right now. You see Mother Randall, you see my brother Hughes Van Ellis. We live this history and we can't ignore it. It's our lives with us. Oh my goodness. We lost everything that day, our homes, our churches, our newspapers, our theaters, our lives. Greenwood represented all the best of what was possible for black people in America and for all the people. No one cared about us for almost 100 years. We and our history have been forgotten, washed away. This Congress must recognize us and our history. For black America, for the white Americans, and for all Americans, that's some justice.
Wow. Well, I'm definitely, I want to hear what she has to say to the end, but absolutely like incredible and true that yes, we have to know about this history. Imagine like the insane gaslighting. Like she's talking about how the Chamber of Commerce, which is a very conservative institution in every city across the United States that's subsidized by municipal governments and by tax dollars, the Chamber of Commerce in her city in Tulsa denied that the massacre ever happened. The greater, completely ignored by history, completely ignored by governments. And, this is like, it's like what we're seeing here is almost like a truth and reconciliation committee, like what happens in South American countries after a military dictatorship is brought, is ended, and it has to go, there has to be a public acknowledgement of massacres and mass death committed by the government. This was a similar event. And only now, 100 years later, a century, and this amazing person, this amazing woman is here speaking the truth of what happened, what she witnessed as a 7-year-old little girl, watching people shot to death, bombs dropping around her. Insane insane. And that only now is she brought into the public eye in this way, and acknowledged. This is incredible. So let's hear the rest, what she has to say.
Yes, is that it? Thank you.
Do you want to say anything else?
I thought it was another page.
Do you want to say anything else?
She might be done.
Is there anything else you want to say?
No, it's not.
Well, that was it. So what an incredible person. But she wasn't the only survivor who testified. There's also this man. I don't know if she said that was her brother, but
Van Ellis.
let's see.
My name is Hughes Van Ellis,
Hughes Van Ellis.
and I am 100 years old, and I am a survivor of the Tulsa Race Massacre.
He was a baby when it happened?
Because of the massacre, my family was driven out of our home. We were left with nothing. We were made refugees in our own county. My childhood was hard, and we didn't have much. We worried what little we worried what little we had would be stolen from us,
My God.
just like it was stolen in Tulsa.
Wow. Well, if you guys want to see more of this, this particular one is the whole entire subcommittee hearing. This is what do you call it? Reuters live survivor of the Tulsa Massacre testify before the U.S. House. So this was quite a long thing that included all kinds of different testimonies from historians and all kinds of stuff. But what I found most powerful was the testimony of living survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre. This shows you that history is never behind us, right? It's always with us. It's right here. You know, the time only goes one way, and we're living in the bleeding edge of it right now, okay? And, you know, what we saw happen to George Floyd, what we saw on January 6th to a certain degree, you know, what we're seeing in Israel and Palestine, you know, today, this is all part of the world as we know it, as it's existed, and the way people treat each other, the way governments, the way states treat citizens who it deems, less than others, how supremacists of whatever race treat people they deem as, you know, underneath them, as inhuman, subhuman. Keep in mind the Tulsa Massacre was done because Black Americans were building prosperity for themselves. They were building independence. Tulsa is known for, it was called Black Wall Street because there were doctors, there were lawyers, there were artists, there were Black-owned banks, Black-owned newspapers, you know, centers of culture, theaters, as that woman explained. And people still alive today who survived this atrocity. It's an atrocity. And only now are they actually seeing something, even an acknowledgement of that.